Hey all, it's Mooch. Welcome to what I hope will be the first of many videos that I'm doing for my patrons, and hopefully it's interest to everybody, where I answer the questions in more details, not things like, is battery A or battery B better, but the questions that have much longer answers to them that I can't answer in the huge stream of 150, 200 questions a day that I answer from Vapers about battery A or battery B, or what's the best battery for this, or the best battery for that. And I hope you enjoy it. I hope you find some of these questions useful, and perhaps same as a question that you had. Let's get right to it. The first one is from Christopher Joseph. I always wonder about mods with battery sleds for series or parallel connections. I imagine there has to be some kind of effect on the battery performance from the not so great contact connections. Do you ever test them like that? Not recently. It is a big issue because if you've got one mod that I tested a while ago had a 0.4 volt drop between the battery and just the circuit board. That's not even including inefficiency of the regulator circuit itself. This is a regulated mod. The circuit board traces, any additional wiring to the 510, etc. All these things that add voltage drops. Just 0.4 volt drop coming from the battery, which means if you've got a mod that's, battery that's sitting at 3.6 volts, the mod would turn off going, whoa, I'm at 3.2 volts, and you're missing out on maybe half the capacity of that battery. It has a huge effect, but I haven't tested it because the mods come as they come, and either they work and they're efficient, or they're not, or here's how much life you get it with it or not. And I think I wouldn't be able to come back to the company and say, hey, I tested them, you've got a 0.4 volt drop, you need to change that. And they'll go, well, we've made 100,000 of them, the tooling is set, we're done, we're ready, but thanks for your testing. I don't know if it would lead to change. I'm totally open to doing it, and the offer always stands for a company to test the efficiency of their mods. But you're right to think that it makes a difference. It can have a huge difference. And the mods that people talk about that give so much battery life, that can be one of the reasons why. Where, under same power conditions, two different mods, because of just these connections and the wiring and the copper traces on the circuit board that are made bigger or better in some way or another from one mod versus another. Doug Peterson asked, is there a way to test the, quote, health of your batteries? Yes, there is. One of the best ways to test health is capacity, or the loss of capacity. Now, there's also internal resistance, which is what causes the voltage sag or voltage drop. As that voltage drops get bigger and bigger as the battery ages, because the internal resistance goes up, the mod, particularly a regulated mod, will turn off sooner and sooner, or you'll get more frequent or earlier low or weak battery alerts. So you can test capacity with a lot of chargers. Now, analyzing charges. Now, it may not be accurate, not typically, but the ones that are off are typically off 100 or 200 mAh, but that's okay. If you have a set of batteries and you test them, and you come back and test them later, it's okay if it's offset by 100 or 200 mAh, as long as that offset is constant. You can test them a couple of times in the first month just to make sure. Now, I don't mean test them from when you get them or what you vape them down to. You got to bring them down to 2.5 volts and then charge back up. That's how you test the full capacity of the battery. And if you've lost maybe 20% of the capacity of the battery, it's starting to become on its way out. That's when the manufacturers start saying the battery has reached the end of its life. There's no reason for you to stop using it unless it's running hot, or the wrap is damaged, or it's acting weird. You can use it if it's dropped 30 or 40%. If your 3,000 mAh battery is 2,000 mAh and you still want to use it, go ahead and use it, assuming everything else is okay. Testing internal resistance can be a big problem with these analyzing charges. Most of them are way off. You should be getting readings from about 14 to 30 milliohms for the decent batteries that we use, not the ultra high capacity ones that can be up to 50 milliohms. So if you're getting numbers a lot higher than that, just don't use them. Capacity loss shows up earlier anyway as a battery ages, and it's easier to measure. So I'd say go by capacity loss to get a general idea of the health of your battery. But certainly if it's acting weird or if it's not performing as well, there's a good indicator that the health is on the way out. James Whiting asks, maybe you could explain about fluoride battery technology and run over if these will have the amp rating and wattage to be of any use to us. The fluoride batteries, the fluoride ion battery technology, very promising. It can have up to, theoretically, 8 times, maybe even 10 times the energy density of the batteries you have now. And when I say energy density, that's not related to how much power can pump out quickly, just how many electrons you can store to slowly let out. So we're talking ultra high capacity, 15,000 mAh batteries, but with a 5 amp rating. Power density is where we get into, we can put out 100 amps and et cetera and so forth. So the energy density is high, but fluoride ion battery technology, normally, as it exists now, need to be heated up to over 150 degrees Celsius before you can start operating them. That's hot. So we can't use that. Now, there in the labs now is technology for room temperature fluoride batteries. That holds a lot more promise for making it usable for us, but what do we have to give up in battery life? What do we have to give up in performance, etc.? It's just in the labs now. This stuff won't be available for years. So there's nothing that we'll be able to use with fluoride technology, fluoride ion battery technology, where we're using lithium-ion now. We'd go to fluoride ion for at least 5 years, that I would say, and it may never get commercialized. 99%, 99 out of 100 new announcements, breakthrough, etc. and so forth, they never see the light of day. They never get commercialized for one reason or the other. Too expensive, the materials are too hard to get, it takes too long, there's no real market need for it because of some other batteries that take the place, or no one's just interested in the technology for whatever reason. I'm hopeful. I'm always hopeful for any of these technologies, but think of it this way. What we're using now are all the miracle advancements, the miracle announcements they made 5-10 years ago. And we've only had these tiny improvements from year to year. So that's what you'd expect now going on to subsequent years. Just little advancements that come out and improve what we use. And hopefully that continues. Batteries like the Samsung 30T, 40T, 20S, the Moly cell P42A, and some other cells. Those are great jumps over 25Rs and the VTCs and other batteries that we held up at the top of our list of what to buy. Bryce Cummings. I've always been curious about how much of an effect plated contacts have, if any, or if it's just to look nice. And this is talking about mechanical mods. If it's a tiny difference, why have it at all? Wouldn't it be cheaper without it? I know in mechs, it makes things easier for removing minimal arcing with an eraser. He personally has not felt a difference between plated and unplated, though he feels solid silver is another story. Plated contacts have almost no effect on the overall resistance or conductivity of a mechanical mod. It can't. It can't. You've got this entire mech that, it's a copper mech, has, a dozen millivolts. It might be 12 millivolts, 10 millivolt drop at 30 amps. 0.01 volt drop. You might lose 1/4 of 1 watt of power in the mech itself. The contact is just a percentage of that 1/4 watt. Now, if you take a contact and put just a few thousandths of an inch of plating on it, let's say it's 1/100th of an inch, 1/100th the thickness of the contact, you've got 1/100th of a small percentage of a 1/4 watt power difference. It's just not going to make a difference because the plating is 1/100th of the thickness of the contact, and the contact's only a small percentage. What was the other part of the question? Oh, why have it at all? It can make a difference in the maintenance. For me, I think silver-plated contacts or silver contacts are easier to maintain. They don't oxidize as quickly. Just overall, it just seems easier to take care of than an all copper mech. Brass, I find to be about the same as silver in terms of maintenance, and stainless steel, very easy to maintain, but you've got a bigger voltage drop through stainless steel that some people may or may not notice. Now, I think it would be less expensive to have non-plated contacts, so it's really cost and convenience for you. Now, plated contact, though, you've got to be careful. Arcing blows through the plating instantly, and as soon as you get arcing, it begets more arcing because you've got high points. Maintenance is critical. You've got to take down the high points, but you also have to not remove the plating. Otherwise, you've got your copper contact or whatever else is underneath. So that's where I think, if you've got a mech that arcs, get solid silver or solid copper just a solid contact, solid metal contact, and don't go to plated because you've got to continually clean that. You don't want to remove the plating from your mech. Dustin Clifton, debone. I would like to know what constitutes a battery being too damaged for use due to arcing and dimples from over-tightening hybrid mech mods. Well, for the manufacturers, any damage is unacceptable and the battery is to be retired immediately. This is why there's zero data on anything that's acceptable, because none of it's acceptable. There's no information I can go by or anyone to go by to say that's okay, that's not. It's not like, oh, 1 millimeter indent or this or that or here. There's zero information. That forces us to err on the side of caution to say any damage, replace the battery. You know, as soon as you start to see denting, stop denting the battery. Get a battery with 4 legs at the top contact instead of 3. VTC batteries dent very easily. 21700s dent easily. Unfortunately, the 3 best performing batteries we have, Samsung 30T40T and the Molicel P42A, you know, that wider contact and about the same width legs coming down for the top contact, the metal bends easier. Just do your best not to do that. But as soon as you start denting, if you can't stop that from happening, you're going to have to replace the battery. You just factor that into your costs. In terms of arc marks, they're not inherently bad. On the top, it's less of a problem than on the bottom, because on the bottom, you're blasting through the one and only layer, leading you to flammable organic solvents that are inside the battery there. It's really bad to start blasting away through the bottom of the battery. Take the high points down at least, so you're not causing a lot more arcing. But do whatever you can. You're going to have to lower the current levels, change mods, whatever. But otherwise, just factor in, oh yeah, these batteries will last me 2 years, but I'm denting them or arcing the hell out of them, the bottom maybe, and I have to replace them every 3 months because of that. It's just no good answer to that, unfortunately. Yves Ballon. What are the potential problems with rewrappers? Even the known ones. Pull up a chair, folks. Now, potential problems has nothing to do with what is the problem with any rewrapper, or certainly all rewrappers. But actually, I'm going to have to look at the list because there's quite a list. Number 1, low or mixed grade cells. We never know what we're getting with a rewrapper. We can't. But wait, you're thinking, well, that's why I only buy Samsung or Sony, the OEM wraps. Wait, hold on. Issues with that too. Inconsistent performance of the China cells that a lot of them are switching to because it's more consistent supply. Instead of looking for excess inventory, gray market, diverted shipments, etc., that they can use of cells they can rewrap, they can go to a China factory and get a consistent supply. Well, they either have much wider range of performance for a particular grade, or they just take everything off the line that comes off the line and they sell it in one big batch. Either way, it's more inconsistent performance. Now, are we going to notice that a lot? No, I don't think so, but it's there. And sometimes you get a cell you are going to notice a difference of. It's an issue with any of the rewrappers. Unknown safety record of the China manufactured cells. Yeah, some of them say they've got the safety documentation. We don't know if it's genuine or not. I am making no accusations here. This is just a statement of fact. We don't know. Inconsistent availability from the rewrappers. They might, you know, if, let's say they're getting Murata VTC6A 21700s, they might only get 1,000 of them, and that's it for 6 months. And we don't know what grade, etc., and so forth. So that's also an issue, but most people, I think, now know, hey, you buy it today, or who knows when you're going to be able to buy that cell again. Now, for those of you thinking, well, that's why I only buy Samsung, Sony, LG, Panasonic, Sanyo, Molicel in the original wrap. There's some problems with that. None of those batteries are authorized purchases. None. Unless you're buying from an authorized vendor for Molicel. It's the only company that will sell to vapers. All the rest don't want to. And you're either getting diverted shipments that are supposed to be recycled, or you're getting excess inventory, mixed grades, low or mixed grades of cells. And this, I'm talking Samsung, Sony, LGs in the original wrap. They have a lot of the same problems. We're just screwed in terms of the batteries. We have to be diligent no matter what. And this is why buying from the really good, trusted, known vendors. Yes, I know you can save $1, $2 to someone else. So what? A battery lasts for 2 years. $1 a cell over 2 years? That's nothing. Just to not have to worry about your cells, for me personally, is totally worth it. With some of the Molicel distributors like lithium-ion wholesale, being the authorized distributor for the US, and I've forgotten the ones for Europe already, my apologies. But this is a way of getting a known grade of an authorized battery with known quality, and it's a good way to go right now. Now, I'm not saying buy Molicel or nothing else. Molicell's not paying me money. I'm not Molicell's bitch. This is just common sense. I'm hoping the situation improves, either with other manufacturers or who knows what in the future. But right now, it's a good opportunity if you're worried about some of the other things that can happen with rewrap cells or mixed grades or fakes or something for the OEM cells. Other questions from Eve. Battery chemistry. Are some of the batteries we use not lithium-ion? What is the impact of that? All the batteries we use are lithium-ion, including LiPos. LiPo is just a marketing term now, has become a marketing term for a particular chemistry, lithium cobalt oxide, that is used in what we call LiPos. Round cells we use, almost none exist now that are LiPos. And I'm finding out more and more about that right now. But for all the other ones, they're the slightly safer chemistry. So there's really no need to think about chemistries and lithium-ion or not lithium-ion right now. We're using the middle to safer chemistries, not the safest, because the performance is too low. What used to be called IMR, the manufacturer model number prefix of IMR, that's just not used in any of the batteries we use. The performance just isn't high enough for what we need. They all add other things to it to boost the performance. Oh, another question from Eve. Maybe some industry news, how the gray market functions, but also what progress is being made. The short answer is how the gray market functions. Well, there are a couple ways you can get batteries. One is excess inventory. An electric vacuum cleaner company buys 250,000 cells. They stop making the vacuum cleaner after only using 200,000 cells. They sell the 50,000. That goes into a whole bunch of different hands, ends up in China. The rewrappers get those cells. It could be 3 months later, it could be 2 years later. It could be mixed grades, who knows? They can join together different batches. We have no idea. The other way is, and this is where it gets very gray, is companies, or like America or Europe, will have batteries that need to be recycled. It might be an old shipment, who knows what, but they're shipped off to China for recycling. Well, they don't get recycled. They get sold off, and those get wrapped and sold back to us. These are huge issues for us, and we have nothing we can do. Progress is being made. Yeah, and I wrote down, no progress is being made or will be made. It's China, and China isn't particularly inspired to police this within the borders. It is getting better. There are some laws addressing this and stuff, but what do you do about someone who has 50,000 cells? That's not going to appear on any government radar for regulatory or legal action. And these companies, you can form a company, buy and sell some batteries, get them wrapped, sell them to a rewrapper, or wrap them yourself and sell them, and be gone a week later. It's a brutal situation. Again, another reason to buy from authorized vendors or distributors, from known trusted vendors, etc. Because of the way we get our batteries, because Samsung, Sony, LG, Panasonic, Sanyo don't want to sell to us. We're forced into this gray market. Walter J. Robbins, I think a lot of us are pretty knowledgeable. I agree. He'd like to know a little more about me. What is my day job? I design, since 1992, I've acted as a consulting engineer, designing power electronics for my clients. Going into some other things for it, but that's battery chargers, electronic loads for testing batteries, power supplies, energy harvesters to take heat, light, motion, and use it to create power or store power. All these related things. I do devices to my client. Most of it's been higher reliability stuff. I don't do mass market big stuff, and I only take it through a design stage or prototyping stage, and then my client decides whether they'll go into production with it, which is usually low volume production, like the US Army doing a guided parachute, GPS guided parachute guidance package. I had some of the work for the battery packs for it, in terms of conditioning those battery packs. Very few of those were made. I only made, I think it was like 6 or 7 dozen conditioning units for that. And then that's it, that's the job. But I like it because it's always a different challenge. I'm not a great 9-to-5er. In fact, I've never done 9 to 5 ever. Came out of school, did freelance for some other things, and then went into the engineering. And I love it because of the challenges. And when I became a vapor, I realized I can use some of that knowledge in terms of what I've learned about batteries, and I had so much of the battery test equipment to expand and do that for the vaping community also. Let's see, what are your favorite kinds of eLiquid? I don't have a favorite. There's no all-day vape. In winter, I like some great custards, maybe a little fruit in there. I also like the desserts, the chocolates, though that's hard to do. Don't like coffee vapes because I'd rather have a coffee with the vape. No all-day vape, but the closest thing to an all-day vape is just 70 VG, 30 PG with a touch of mint. I use it as a palate cleanser. It's dirt cheap. I'm a stress smoker, so I'm a stress vapor most of the time. And if I'm stressed out and I'm reading a document or poring over a contract, I'm not tasting my juice. It's that mechanical action. It's that great lung filling that can calm me down, etc. So, or the walk I take while I'm doing that. So for me, why spend money on a juice I'm not going to enjoy? And if you've done a day of 70 VG with a touch of mint, and then I switch to a juice, it's like, wow, flavor explosion. And it's an orgasmic experience, and I get to save money for the rest of the day when I didn't really need that. Last question from him, what ohm and wattage is my sweet spot? None. I vape from 18 watts to 118 watts, from a T18 up to DNA 200 mods at 115, 120 watts. Coils maybe anywhere from a 0.8 down to a 0.0, I'm not going to tell you, in a mech. Typically I'm probably around 0.15, 0.12, 0.17 on dual fuse Claptons, in regulated or in a mech. It's not quite what I'm looking for in a mech, but with a 30T in the mech, you can make up for a lot with the coils. It's so much of it's the mood, the juice, how often I vape, the mod I pick. I like bouncing between. I'm just drippers now. I've given up on tanks because except I squonk with the 70 VG in the mint, because that I'll keep coming back to. But everything else, it's just drippers, because I might want to switch 5 times in one day. David Soulsby, for those patrons, when I grow up, I'm going to learn how to read. For these Patreon shows, general discussion on how you see the future, new chem companies, trends, etc. Anything I find interesting. What I think will be coming soon, because I was talking about fluoride ion technology and it's years away, and so many of the announcements that they make are years from being anything maybe we could use. Stuff I'm interested in seeing coming soon, hopefully, are aqueous electrolytes, namely water-based electrolytes. An electrolyte is the fluid inside the battery that conducts the ions from the positive to the negative portion of the battery, back and forth between charge and discharge. Now, in the batteries we use now, it's a flammable organic solvent that's bad if the battery bursts or anything else. Even just the battery just and vents, it's toxic as hell. Let's switch to something else. So they have water-based electrolytes now, but they don't perform well. They're getting better, and I'm hoping, just because of the safety aspect, that is something that we can see in the next couple of years. I don't know if anything for us. I think it'll be in smaller, lower power batteries, but that'll hopefully eventually grow. Solid-state batteries, where they're actually using a ceramic or glass electrolyte between the positive and negative. Essentially, they put the positive goop on one side, the negative paste goop on the other side of a sheet of glass or a sheet of ceramic, and the ions pass back and forth between it. Now, you might be thinking, how do you pass stuff back and forth through ceramic and glass as easy as you can through a liquid? You can't. That's the big problem. These are very low capacity, very low current rated batteries. Now, there is a company doing EV, electric vehicle batteries, solid state batteries. They're expensive. They're big compromises in a lot of ways. It's just beginning to come to market now, and I'm very excited. You might have seen the videos where they're taking a solid state battery and just cutting it away, but an LED they're lighting up stays lit as they're snipping off parts of the battery. That's an impressive demo, and I'm excited about the safety part of it. They're not safe. No battery will ever be safe, particularly high power batteries, because of the power they contain. But that's a great step, especially not having flammable organic solvent in the battery. The other chemistries, the other technologies, they're years away. I'm really not even looking at them. I only vaguely glance at a lot of the announcements now, because I know there'll be 5 more announcements in the next 10 years about that, or otherwise they'll just fade away. So I've gotten kind of jaded. I don't get as excited as I used to be. Jared Andrews, Ever since rechargeable batteries became common, I hear about battery memory and how it's important to discharge your battery fully before recharging. Somehow, that is not a problem anymore. I believe, but I'd still like an explanation as to how this misinformation or information got started and what fixed it. Well, battery memory, put that in quotes, is something that only existed in a NASA satellite under very specific fixed charge-discharge conditions. Exactly the same charge and discharge every single day. And what happens is the battery internals kind of end up starting to think, quote unquote, that, hey, if you discharge me halfway and go back up and halfway and go back up, that halfway point is really 0 point. Now, this memory effect, which is really called voltage depression, because it makes the voltage sag hugely, only happens in nickel metal hydride and nickel cadmium batteries. It cannot happen in lithium-ion batteries. And that may be why Gerald Andrews is thinking, oh, it's been fixed, because it doesn't exist in a lithium-ion battery. What happens in the nickel metal hydride batteries is lots of little tiny crystals, which the electrons can bore through very easily, low resistance, start to form as you charge and discharge over and over, only partially, start to form into one big crystal. Well, now the only place the electrons can go is around the outside. And you've lost all that capacity because it's one big crystal. The electrons are only active on the outside of the one crystal instead of on the outsides of a million smaller crystals. So only the part you charge and discharge stays small crystals, so it seems like you've lost half your capacity. Well, also the internal resistance goes way up, which leads to huge voltage sag, and now you've got voltage depression. The memory part is forgetting or being unable to use that other half of the battery. I'm hoping that makes sense. If not, just know that it does exist for lithium-ion. It still exists for nickel metal hydride or NiCads, which enjoy a complete discharge and recharge, which breaks up that one big fat crystal and all the little tiny ones to get a lot of performance of the battery back. Not exactly the same, but it's a good thing to do every couple months if you're using a nickel metal hydride or nickel cadmium battery pack, maybe an old power tool or something like that, to bring it all the way down to cut off and then all the way back up, fully charged again. Let's see. Thanks for bearing with me on some of these longer questions. I hope some of them are interest to you guys. Phil Lee, I'm curious as to the reasoning behind taking batteries out of the mod to charge them in a separate charger. And that's an awesome question, and one that I see debated often. And there's no right answer. It gets so polarized. People get really emotional about this. You don't have to, but there are some advantages to external charging and why I recommend it. And I might recommend it for different reasons than you might think. Number one, it can be faster. You're always stuck with what an internal charger can do. If you've got a 3 battery mod, 3 batteries in series, you might think 2 amp charging, that's great. Except by the time you get to 3 batteries, you're only down at about 0.6, 0.7 amps. It's not that fast. An external charger, you might be able to go 1 amp or even 2 amps for some of the high performance batteries. Be a lot faster. You can monitor the health of the battery, the temperature of the battery, and whether anything's going wrong with the battery with an external charger through the capacity tests. If you're always discharging your mod down to about the same point, vaping the same way every day, well, you know when you put it back, it'll say 1800 mile back in the battery. You all of a sudden see one battery saying, oh, only 1200 went back in, you know something may be up there and you have to look into it. You can change the charge rate if you switch to different batteries. If you can switch to different batteries, you may want to charge some at half an amp, some at 1 amp, some at 2 amp. If you put them into your mod to charge them, you're stuck with whatever that comes up with, the mod has. And almost lastly, charging externally saves a very fragile USB port. These are very fragile. These connectors are not made to be used the way we use them, especially with this, stuff that we do like crazy, or tugging on the cable, etc. For when you might really need it. You're out camping and you want to use a solar charger, or you're on a trip or something and you want to do USB charging instead of taking a charger with you, you need that USB connector. External charging lets you save that connector for when you really need it. Now, one reason I additionally recommend external charging is because somewhere out there are a few people who've had a mod burst into flames from USB charging. And I have to assume if it can happen to anyone out there, it could happen to anyone who asks me if it's okay to charge by USB. I'll have to go, no, it might not be. You know, if there's a 1 in 100,000 chance, whatever, you could have a problem. So I recommend external charging because it's easier to feel the batteries on a non-flammable surface and only when you are around and awake. And I have to say that because somebody out there will get USB charger or an external charger and leave it on their bed and fall asleep or something, and something will happen. It's sometime in the next 5 years that will happen to somebody around in the world. And I have to assume it's anyone who asks me. But there's some very good practical reasons to go with external charging also, and you can make up your mind which one you want to go with. Certainly, if you feel your mod getting hot around the charger, stop using it. Take a break from the charging and go again, because what you feel on the outside of your mod is nothing like what the real temperature is on that actual circuit board. No matter how much metal is involved or anything, the inside temperature will be much higher. Roy French, what about questions dealing with what the different material used in a mech does that have to do with its performance, and what is the main causes and the different types of voltage drops? I'd like to hear some safety guidelines, maybe those new vapers who have seen recent videos, and think a 0.05 build is okay. The material that used in a mech has almost zero effect on the voltage drop through a mech. The material, just the material. You've got 1/8 of an inch of metal. It doesn't matter if it's stainless steel or brass or silver or copper. What matters is your contacts, your threads, cleaning, fundamental 10x effect on the voltage drop through the mech is to the cleaning. And I don't just mean cleaning with toothbrush and soap. I mean getting off the oxidation, getting to the bottom of the threads, half an hour crazed cleaning. And yeah, you got to do that every single day. There's a lot of work if you want to get max performance out of a mech. Now, some of the things that can cause problems, like not cleaning, not tightening it properly, but you can't dent the battery and things like that. Certain mechs just arc a lot. You've got to get rid of that arcing damage daily. You can use, of course, I cleaned up and now I don't know where I put it. Scotch-Brite pads, the heavy-duty pads. See, Scotch-Brite on Amazon. They're the green pads, plastic, so you know a little bit of dust around the battery. You don't have to be as crazy about cleaning it as some other things. Never file. It won't damage plating unless you're insane. It can help taking down just a little bit of the high spots, which is what you want to do. You'll never get out the pits because you got to take down all the metal if you want to get out the pits. But if you can take down the high spot, you take down those 2 tiny points that touch. Now all the current goes through those two little tiny points till it explodes it away, and now it touches a little bit further. And every time you get arcing damage, that's a point where more arcing damage can occur. So definitely clean that up. And did I actually answer his question? Main causes, different types of droppage. Okay, so it's cleanliness, arcing damage. Now, assuming you've got clean, well-made mechs, then yes, silver mech is going to perform a little bit better than a copper mech, which can perform decently better, a little bit better than brass and aluminum. Brass and aluminum are about the same, and those are decently better than stainless steel. Stainless steel, you might drop 1 or 2 watts in the mech. Brass and the other ones, maybe you could drop a 1/3 of a watt, half a watt. Through copper and silver, now you're talking like 1/4 of a watt. So you're really not seeing much of a difference to stainless steel, and you may not even notice it at all. For some vapors, you know, at 100, 105 watt vape, some vapors can notice a 1.5 watt drop. Others won't. Now silver, and I'm going to do a video on mech mod performance and materials and stuff, but silver is only a 10% better conductor or so, less than copper. And if you have a 1/4 watt drop in a good copper mech, now you're going down to, you know, 0.225 watt drop in a silver mech. That's a tiny percentage of 1 watt. You're not going to see a difference. What makes a difference is up here. What we expect, our own biases, or the other things, the threads, the cleanliness, the contact design, all that other stuff that can turn what could be a really good performing mech into one that doesn't perform quite as well. And we have to be able to separate those, but it's hard unless we test a lot of mechs, and I'm hoping my mech testing can flesh some of these things out. Jonathan Tang, my question, is Mooch interested in in developing a product through a platform like Kickstarter or another crowdfunding program? Well, yeah, stay tuned. And our last question, Gerald Andrews again. Is it healthier for the battery to recharge at a lower current? The charger I use gives me the choice from 0.5 amp up to 2 amps. He assumes slower and lower is better overall for the health of the batteries. But there he goes, assuming again. What are the facts? Thank you. Slower is better, but at a certain point, it doesn't offer anything. You know, going from 2 amp, for most batteries, 2 amps to 1 amp, that can make a difference in the overall life of the battery. From 1 amp to 0.5 amp, that can make a little bit of a difference, but less. From 0.5 amp to 1/4 amp, you're not going to see any difference, not with the way we abuse our batteries otherwise. So slower can be better. It never hurts to go slower. If you want to charge at 1/10 of an amp and come back in 2 days, you can do that. I have a charging rates table. You could, in the description section of the video, go to my blog at ECF, and I have the manufacturer's charging rates for standard rate, the fast rate, which I don't recommend unless it's an emergency because it will age your batteries faster. You can do it a dozen times, a few dozen times, that's okay. But if you do it every day for 6 months, your battery's not going to last much longer than that. And also what I recommend for ultra long life, you know, it might be a 4 amp fast charge, the 1.5 amp standard charge, and I would do like a 0.75 amp, you know, ultra long life one. And anything really lower than that, slower than that, it's just not making a difference. But go ahead and do it, especially if you have a battery that gets warm, or if some chargers just run really frickin' hot at the higher rates, and that is really bad for the battery. That heat, that ages it significantly. High temperature storage, high temperature use, or charging. So maybe you say, hey, my charger runs, you know, hot as Hades at 2 amps. My batteries are rated for 4 amps, but I can't charge at 2 because they get so hot from the charger heat coming up. I'm going to charge them at 1 amp. And that is it for my patrons' questions. I hope you found some of the answers useful also, and I hope to be able to do this fairly regularly. Let me know what you think down below. If you'd like to be able to request battery tests or post questions that I answer on these, get advanced battery news, other things that only my patrons see, consider becoming a patron. It's only $2 a month or higher, certainly, if you feel like supporting me on that level. And links are in the description section. Thank you for watching. Hey all, it's Mooch. Welcome to the first of what I hope will be many. Test is done.